Well, hello and welcome to another recording of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. We are back with more news, tech content, and wisdom from the world of marketing. Joining me, man on a mission to keep marketing simple, the host of the Roger video series and the author of 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and Marketing Plans. I give you Monsieur Roger Edwards.
Oh, hello everybody, and thank you so much for that. And my co-host is also a man on a mission to demystify digital marketing. He is the host of the Content Marketing Studio video podcast. Please welcome Mr. Pascal Fintoni.
Well, thank you so much. I can also thank the many thank yous and well done messages we got last week when we announced that this was year 2 of Two Geeks and Marketing Podcast, this being episode 52. And for episode 51, as you saw on the socials, Roger, it just feels very special, doesn't it, to have people that we know well and people that are a bit more distant, more like acquaintances from across the world, to just wish us the very best.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And again, it's a big milestone to do a second year. We could call it Series 2, I guess, if you wanted to. But yeah, a second year of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. And people were pleased to see us back.
That was wonderful. So I tell you what, let's get going with In the News.
𝗬𝗵𝗲, the former head of programming at Paramount, who helped develop series like Star Trek Discovery, has joined Spotify as their new head of US studios and video operations.
Wow, well, according to research conducted by 𝗧𝗵𝗲, more than 340,000 businesses were registered in the UK between January and June 2021, an increase of 32% from the same time period in 2019.
Channel 4 has further prioritised streaming over linear, with every piece of our scripted content will now be primarily commissioned for all 4, according to the Chief Operating Officer, Jonathan Allen.
Amazon has introduced its first line of televisions, which allows customers to ask Alexa to recommend a new show or play something from Prime Video without opening the app.
According to TheDrum.com, Bruce Willis is the first Hollywood actor to have given permission for his image to be used in a TV advert to appear as a digital, de-aged and deep-faked Bruce Willis.
But in France, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and 𝗏 have reached an agreement on music licensing for podcast, with prices starting for €0.125 per subscriber per month to cover creators, very much like PRS for music in the UK or APRA in Australia.
The sports bar chain Buffalo Wild Wings has organised a competition for the loudest crowd cheering during football matches, using artificial intelligence to determine a winner.
Well, the aptly named Nerds Candy is introducing a new packaging that gives customers access to a themes Dungeons & Dragons campaign and prizes like D&D starter set and player's handbook.
Fantastic.
I am a very happy man, Roger. I've managed to speak about Dungeons & Dragons on a marketing podcast. It was mentioned in This Week in History, but to have it in the news is quite an achievement.
Especially seeing as it's been going for probably close to, if not more than 40 years.
Yeah, the 70s. So, wow, Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, both Roger and I were RPG players back in the days, and I know there's been a renaissance across, generations and so on. But let's move on to something perhaps more business-like. Your first news item, 𝗬𝗵𝗲, who helped develop TV series, now working for a podcasting company.
It's a bit of a change in focus, isn't it? Going from developing series like Star Trek Discovery, one of the hottest properties in the entire world, in the TV world, moving across to Spotify. But, they obviously want somebody with those really sort of robust creative juices, I guess.
Because, two things. Are Spotify then, do they have ambitions to also create video content, or is it just because they want to tap into the talent around storyboarding, around character development, all the wonderful things that would come in so that they can do some amazing audio storytelling?
I would hope they're going to stick with audio. To me, Spotify just is audio. And again, Pascal, you and I have this conversation on the show frequently, that we do seem to be living in a world where everybody, and whether it's a company or an app or a platform, there seems to be this predilection to be the same as everybody else. So I hope they haven't hired this person with a view to let's become the next YouTube or let's become the next Netflix. for goodness sake, stick to your knitting, stick to your niches, and do that really, really well. Excel at that, and we'll all be happy. We don't want everything in the world to be exactly the same.
I think this is also a smart recruitment, because a smart leader will always bring talent around areas that they themselves are not so good at, or they have little track record. And to have a multidiscipline kind of team for Spotify, I think is going to be, I think it's a smart move, so long as, I agree with you, they stick to being the go-to audio platform. Talking of audio, this ability to spend a little bit of money to have some music on your podcast, 21.25 euros, essentially, depending on how many subscribers you have per month. This could be a very, very small investment to really bring some kind of contemporary or current music creators on your podcast.
So are they actually saying that for this fee, I could play Genesis songs or U2 songs, and that's on my podcast?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because we've had the chat before where, again, going back to Spotify and their linking with Anchor, that you could actually play snippets of songs as part of an Anchor podcast, as long as you had an associated Spotify account. And if somebody was listening to your podcast and they also had a Spotify account, they would listen to the whole song, whereas if they didn't have a Spotify account, they'd only get the snippet. And that was a way round the copyright rules. But this probably sounds like, for not a lot of money, you could genuinely start your own radio station playing music, and I think that'll appeal to a lot of people.
No, absolutely. And I think it's a good solution to a problem, which is people will want to play music. They will find ways to make it happen and break the rules and hoping not to get caught. And I'm maybe just going to tidy that up. But talking of breaking rules potentially, finally, this idea of Bruce Willis giving permission for his image to be used. He gets paid to do no work, right? So that a Russian telecom company can create an advert with essentially Bruce Willis probably running around and moving away from explosions, a la Die Hard. Where do you stand with this deepfake technology?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? And actually, I'm going to talk about it a little bit in my content spotlight. I mean, let's face it, we would all prefer to see the genuine article. And I mean, I'm trying to think how old Bruce Willis must be. He must be in his late 50s, early 60s. Maybe he's a bit older, I don't know. But, you know, he's one of those guys to me who's always looked about the same age. He might have a little less hair than he had 20 years ago, but he's not one of these people that has aged a lot. But we have seen this de-aging technology happen in films. There was that Netflix film with Robert De Niro in and Al Pacino, and they would both de-age significantly, and it worked to a certain extent, but you could sort of tell that there was something just a little bit wrong with it. So I guess, given that nobody's going to do a job on this ugly mug looking at you in the screen here, I guess I just wish people would just stick to what they look like.
But importantly, this is somebody that looks a bit like Bruce Willis, who's going to have Bruce Willis' face superimposed using deepfake technology, and you'd be watching an advert thinking Bruce Willis is acting in the advert.
Yeah.
Are we in danger of crossing a line very soon where, for example, if I'm going to stretch it all the way to business, you'd be watching a video on a business website where allegedly the CEO is addressing you, where in fact it's an actor, and this all been deepfaked?
Well, that doesn't sound good, does it? Especially if the business leader sat on a Caribbean beach somewhere whilst everybody else is working hard.
For me, then you move into the subject that you and I've explored a lot on this podcast, which is about ethics and honesty. So do you need to then start with a disclaimer saying, this is not Bruce Willis, but we have his permission to use his image? Or are we going to end up in a situation where we're going to go and see a film where James Dean or Elvis Presley are back on screen using deepfake? And so I think there's going to be more debate about it.
Yeah, and again, how much does it cross over with the likes of recreating Princess Leia in Rogue One, for example, using CGI. Is that the same sort of thing?
Yeah, we shall see. But I think for a consumer, you would want to know that you're being addressed by the real person, or that, there's some websites out there that are saying to you, oh, by the way, if you want a welcome video, all you have to do is type the text and we'll create a video where a person essentially speaks at your audience. So I think there's still that desire to hack your way through marketing as opposed to doing the real thing.
No, I think absolutely it's got to be up front, and it says this is a fake Bruce Willis. It has to be. It has to be up front, doesn't it?
Excellent. Well, let's slow things down, if you don't mind, and let's move on to the content spotlights. Now, I always look forward to this segment of the show where we surprise each other with a discovery from the interweb, an article, a podcast, or a video. So, Roger, what are you bringing to the virtual table today?
Well, this is a bit different, Pascal, and it actually ties into what you were talking about there with a faked Bruce Willis, actually. This completely caught me by surprise, but last Saturday there was a live relaunch by the 1970s, 1980s pop group ABBA. And completely out of the blue, they have launched 2 new singles, brand new music, first time in over 40 years, and there's a 10-track album coming in November, and next year there's going to be a virtual series of concerts, all featuring this new music by ABBA. Now, a lot of people probably don't like ABBA, but you can't get away from the fact that they are one of the biggest pop groups that's ever existed, and probably one of the most popular in terms of melodies and tunes and songs you just can't get out of your head. And because of the stage play Mamma Mia, and because of films like Muriel's Wedding and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, their songs are just absolutely ingrained into pop culture. Now, they split up in the very early 1980s and absolutely categorically said that they would never, ever, ever get back together again. But of course, here we are with this announcement coming completely out of the blue, new album and a tour coming up. So I thought, well, this is actually really interesting. And I've sort of grown to like ABBA over the years. Back in the 70s and 80s, I just thought they were the worst thing at all. I was into heavy metal and had long hair in those days. But now, I can appreciate them for what they are. And they bang out a really, really good tune. And, Mamma Mia, the film, which we've reviewed here on the show, and the stage play is just a global phenomenon. So what is really interesting, though, is effectively the content that they are building around this. Now, ABBA are in their mid-70s. It's very unlikely that they would be able to actually go on stage, travel around the world and do as energetic concerts as they used to 40 years ago. So what they've actually done is they've spent months and months and months wearing these suits which record the movements of the body, and they are actually creating avatars, holographic avatars, which will appear on stage at these virtual concerts next year. And just like your Bruce Willis example, Pascal, the faces of ABBA will be superimposed over these avatars. So when you go to the concert, you'll go into the concert and you'll see these avatars on stage. There'll be a proper band playing, but ABBA won't really be there. You'll be watching holograms. Now, I don't know how I feel about that, actually. And I've had a look at the price of the tickets, and they're like £200.
Oh, goodness.
And right. I'm thinking it's like, if I spend £200, whether they're in the 70s or not, I think I'd like to see the real ABBA on stage. But, that's perhaps another debate. But you can't get away from the fact that the technology that is being put into this is just remarkable. And I just love the way that they've relaunched themselves. It came out of the blue, but there's a website called ABBA Voyage. You can download the 2 songs already. They're on Spotify, and they are absolutely unmistakably ABBA songs. They are so catchy. I found myself humming both of them this week. They can still sing. The melodies are still superb, so I'm happy with that. But what I absolutely love, and I'm actually going to read you some of the lyrics from one of the songs. Now, this song is called Don't Shut Me Down, and when you actually read the lyrics, it's sort of talking about a couple that have broken up, I think, but maybe thinking about getting back together. But there's a subtext to it. So the chorus goes something like, and now you see another me. I've been reloaded. I'm fired up, don't shut me down. I'm like a dream within a dream that's been decoded. I'm fired up, I'm hot, don't shut me down. I'm not the one you knew. I'm now and then combined. I'm asking you to have an open mind. So the song's almost like a plea saying, we're back, but we're different. We're not the same as we were 40 years ago. Give us a chance. Don't shut us down. And the song is so good that I think a lot of people listening to it won't actually realise that the song is a plea effectively to give Abba another chance. And I just love that absolute subtext that's going into those lyrics.
That's stunning. I agree with you. I think a lot of people enjoy Abba's music a lot more past than we realise. And they are, if you step away from just the music itself, it's a wonderful example of branding, personal and corporate branding, but also content marketing. You know, I've discussed how many times the music has been repurposed in the different media. In terms of the content itself, it's a tricky one. It reminds me a little of what happened in France in the 80s and 90s. There was a music producer who created what they called the imaginary concerts. So you would go to a concert, but in fact you'd be watching on the giant screen video clips of famous stars. And it was more a party atmosphere than a concert atmosphere. So perhaps that's what they need to do, which is we won't be there, but you're invited to a party where we're going to celebrate our music and our new music. And we're also going to surprise you with some technology. You know, and I suspect there'll be some surprises in there. Because, and I think it's back to the level of clarity we mentioned a moment ago. So if people went to the concert, goodness, Roger, thinking that the real people are there, and then they're faced with avatars and very, very clever kind of projection onto maybe performers or stand-ins or even statues, you'll feel ripped off. But if it's clear from the get-go that you're going for a tech-driven performance, that could be quite interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what else is really interesting about this is that, you know, on YouTube, there's a genre of video where people do reactions to songs. And there's the very famous example of a couple of 15-year-old boys from the States who rewatched a Phil Collins song, In the Air Tonight, from 40 years ago. And it got so many views on YouTube that it actually put the song back to the top of the charts in the United States 40 years down the line. But YouTube is absolutely inundated with people doing reaction videos to these two new Abba songs. And I've seen people, I've watched them, absolutely in tears listening to this stuff. You know, young people who weren't even a glint in their parents' eyes when Abba were first around, actually getting really emotional about listening to this new music.
Can I also say, in the context of the episode, the lines you've read are very interesting when you think about our choice for film marketing.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. So, Pascal, what is your content spotlight this week?
So, this content spotlight has been on our Trello board. You know, as viewers and listeners will remember when we discussed how we produce Two Geeks and the Marketing Podcast, we use Trello to save all our discoveries, findings, and research. And this video has been on Trello for a long while, only because I wasn't sure when and how to introduce it. But your selection last week in Marketing, Tech, and App, when you spoke about the DJI Pocket 2, the creator kind of pack, inspired me to get into it. So the title is The Ultimate Guide to Camera Movement. Every camera movement technique explained by the team at Studio Binder. Now, Studio Binder is a kind of software stroke consultancy company that helps filmmakers manage and plan all aspects of their film project, from pre-production all the way to post-production. They have software solutions, they have courses and support. And they have this incredible set of masterclasses which they publish freely on YouTube. And whilst I agree that Studebinder would be looking after the interest of indie filmmakers, if you are a vlogger, if you are solely looking at creating engaging videos, you should know the language of cinema and visual storytelling, and you've got to learn about movement. And the point is, Roger, we've been stuck indoors primarily, all of us, to create our video content. It's been very, very static. It's been essentially we sit or maybe we stand and we talk, we interview, we do different things. As we are about to be able to go out a bit more and within, respecting still some of the restriction, health and safety measures, I think we need to reconnect with creating content where it's not just what's inside the frame that is moving, but the frame has to move too. And I want to give you a bit of a challenge, if I may, or challenge, as they say where I come from, which is for you to experiment with your DJI Pocket 2 with the different movements. So it's a delightful half-hour documentary, and don't be put off by the length, because what they do is they explain all the different camera movement, but using famous films. So you have the pleasure of watching things like, the Batman or with oh goodness, I've forgotten to them, the actor that passed away sadly, that was directed with Kristen Bell and so on. You're going to watch, classic from Hitchcock and so on. You got Steven Spielberg is in there, Star Wars is in there. So you're going to be watching and be delighted by your favorite films. But within that, you've got this wonderful narration about the different techniques, which I'm going to list out for you and tell you how to make it. So they start by explaining what the static shot is and why it is still useful. So you should be moving all the time. But then the camera can move. So you've got the pan movement, you've got the whip pan, you've got the tilt for the verticals, you've got the push in, which is my favorite, you've got the pull out, you've got the zoom, you've got the crash zoom, used a lot in films like Hot Fuzz and many other things. You've got the dolly zoom, you've got the camera roll where the camera rolls on its axis, you've got tracking, one of my favorite, the trucking, you've got the arc, you've got the boom shot, you've got the random movement, camera shake, and so on and so forth. And whilst it shouldn't be bogged down by the language, knowing those main camera movement can really transform your vlogging and your video marketing. They also give you a cheat sheet. So at the end of the video, you have a link to actually print a creep sheet where all those movements, symbolize for you. And they give you homework at the end, like all good classroom. There's a scene from The Rise of Skywalker. You've got to watch it and you've got to name all the different shots. And what I like about the video, it doesn't tell you just what the shots are and what they are called. They tell you why they are used, tell you about the emotional intent. They tell you how they add to the visual storytelling. And once again, you have the pleasure of watching very famous movie scenes and makes you, oh, wow, that's why I feel like this. I mean, my favorite of all times is the dolly zoom, which is made famous in Vertigo and also in Jaws. Now, in Jaws, as you know, my favorite films of all time, when Chief Brody discovers for the first time there's a shark on the beach, and you've got this incredible dolly zoom where the camera gets close to him, but the background behind him just kind of stretches out to express obviously the level of anxiety and fear that he's feeling. And proud to say that I managed to recreate the dolly zoom on one of my films after many and many attempts. That's fair to say. But it really is fascinating when you start to understand movement of the camera, how it can add not just interest, but an element of storytelling.
Oh, this is fantastic, Pascal. Now, you mentioned the DJI Pocket 2, which I did as my marketing tech last week. I've had the busiest week this week working on a big online conference project, and I haven't been able to get out and about and play with my new toy. But I have been watching, when I've had a spare moment, as many YouTube videos as I can with people explaining the sort of cinematic techniques that you can achieve with this DJI Pocket 2. So this will be another video to add to my watch list. And it's pretty much obvious from what I've learned about this camera that you can pretty much pull off all of those shots that you've mentioned using this remarkable little device. And interestingly enough, whilst I was sitting here thinking about what I was going to do to reply to your description of this piece of content, I was saying, I'm going to mention the dolly zoom. I'm going to mention the dolly zoom. And then, of course, you mentioned the dolly zoom. But that, in my head, is the one shot that I would like to try. That rushing up to Chief Brody's face where the background just goes weird behind him. And as you say, I think what you do is you zoom the camera, you actually walk the camera on a dolly towards the subject whilst actually using the camera lens to zoom out at the same time or something like that.
Yeah, you have both versions, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll have to play around with it, but it's definitely on my list. So I will be watching this straight after this recording.
And thanks again for bringing the DJI Pocket 2, because it's been sitting on the trailer for a while. I'm thinking, how do I bring this filmmaking video in the context of what we talked about? And that was just perfect. So thanks again. Well, we mentioned it, so let's move on to the next segment, which is marketing, tech, and apps. So in this segment, Roger and I look for new tech, new apps, online solutions that can make life easier for all of us as content creators. So Roger, what have you got for us this week?
I was thinking about PR this week, Pascal. One of my clients at the moment, I'm helping them do PR, which isn't my main area of expertise, but I have done a lot of PR over the years working for big corporate. And I decided, I'll have a look and see what there is out there. And it reminded me that when I used to work for big corporate, we used to have these things called press cuttings sent to us every Thursday, which was effectively a PR agency, which we were spending an absolute shed load of money on, would effectively collect together any articles or news items that mentioned our company, and they'd compile them together and send them to us in a nice great big file to read. And I can remember when it physically was basically a load of photocopies of actual printed newspaper articles, which then became digital copies as we moved into the internet era. And I've come across an app now that you can buy for iOS or for Android, and it's called the Mention app, and it will effectively do the same job as those press cuttings. So it will look for mentions of your brand or even just keywords. But if you sort of do a combination of keywords and your brand name, it will show you mentions of your brand on social media and across all sorts of different news outlets. Now, there's a free version of this app which does a remarkable job for no money at all. Obviously, if you want unlimited access to pretty much every publication across the globe, then you're going to have to pay for it. But I would think for a small, medium-sized business who's just looking to listen to what the market is saying about their brand, they could go, they could look no further than this Mention app to get themselves quite a really good response. So definitely well worth having a look. And whilst I was looking for these PR apps, I came across another one which I was going to ignore, but then I thought, no, I'll have a look at it. And actually, I did look at it and think, this isn't actually bad at all. Now, Pascal, it's an app called Rep, R-E-P, as in reputation, and it is effectively a sort of matching service for brands looking to work with influencers. And I know that you and I have had a bit of a problem with influencers on this podcast. I think there's a lot of shady dealing going on here, and I think a lot of people perhaps get conned into using influencers. But from what I can see, this app seems to work really well and seems to me to, actually be on the level. And I think if you are the sort of business that thinks that it could do with working with influencers, and I'm not talking about Kim Kardashian or something stupid like that. I mean, genuinely people, maybe tech people that who would do reviews of your tech or something like that. This app will help match you together. And as I say, it seems to be legit and it seems to be on the level, and there's none of this sort of jiggery-pokery and Machiavellian stuff going on. So if you are looking to work with an influencer, try this Rep app out and let us know how you get on.
Excellent. And I'm glad you're reminding us about APR, but also having some element of control about what is being said about you. I think the exercise of curating content that maybe you've published, you've forgotten about, or where you've been a guest or you've been mentioned, and to feature that on your website or your social media is actually part and parcel of content marketing. So I would definitely check those two apps. I think they're very, very good. Now, for me, I thought I should continue with video production as a theme, following, on from the content spotlight. So these are two platforms that have been mentioned before on the show, but a while back now. And they have done some updates, which I thought was really quite exciting news. So the first one would be, now that you've done this amazing content, Roger, using different camera movement and so on, and you've told your story, how do you edit, the different scenes and segment? And I believe, after years and years of research, I wanted to advise my customers that I have settled on the one platform that is really easy to use, yet incredibly powerful, and that is Filmora, who have released their new version, Filmora 10 or Filmora X, as you have to do, of course, nowadays with numbers. Now, we mentioned 9 almost a year ago, and Filmora 10, oh my goodness, Roger, the features. So to begin with, if you want to work fast, you will work fast on Filmora, but then if you want to do more advanced editing, it's all there, but created in a way that is so user-friendly, more drag and drop than anything else. And the kind of stuff that you now would want from an editing software, whereby we may be tempted to move on to the likes of Adobe or more. Frankly, Filmora 10 is doing it, including tracking for text, including ducking. So ducking is when there's music and voice at the same time, and the voice is not obviously being overshadowed. Color corrections, transitions, it's all there, and I think it's a wonderful addition to someone's kind of content toolkit if they are considering video marketing. Now that video has been produced on Filmora 10, potentially, where do you put it? Now, I think YouTube is still a good destination, but we must also, and I should, give a shout out to Vimeo. Now, I started with Vimeo back in the days of video production for two main reasons, Roger. One, YouTube back in the days didn't give you the chance to really have a full HD version of your video, and you wanted to showcase your work properly, you can imagine. There was also some issues in and around controlling the way it looks, the size, the player, the comments, and so on. Now, of course, YouTube since then has caught up, and you could argue that there's little difference. The one difference is that with Vimeo, when the video is played to the end, it will start at the beginning again, unlike on YouTube, where you're going to have related video. And if you forgot to add a little code, $rel equals 0, then you can have videos from the competition or irrelevant, or even videos that frankly have the wrong kind of language or tone for you. So I recommend people should consider video for all their kind of marketing and proprietary videos, but they also have updated the platform. And I got an email last week saying, did you know? And I realized, no, I didn't, because very often you don't pay attention. So very quickly, Roger, over the past year, in addition to all the hosting kind of features you would expect from Vimeo, they also now have a creating your own videos from template feature. So if you've recorded, for example, a scene, you can upload that scene on Vimeo, and you've got the square, the portrait, the landscape templates galore, and good text animation and so on. And this is a bit different to Canvas. You could also stand out from the crowd. They have screen recording. So if you want to send somebody a quick message saying this is how you do it, where you can record your screen and talk it through as well, they have screen recording. For corporates, they have live streaming, a very high-end version. So not for small businesses, I would argue, Roger. And also for corporate, they have a company video hub. So what they're saying is, once you've created 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 videos, it becomes a nightmare to find them, to track them, to use them, particularly if you have people working on different locations remotely. So you can have access to a company video hub. Think of it as your own personal YouTube channel that you can access. And they also have a plethora of online tutorial, very much like Studio Binder, about lights, about studio setup, about recording, about editing, and so on. So Vimeo, I think, is a strong consideration for the marketing element of your video. And they have introduced some new features from creating to recording, which I think is very important.
Yeah, Filmora sounds really interesting, Pascal. It's typical, isn't it? You know, again, people will know from listening to the show, I have had loads of problems with Adobe Premiere Pro over the last couple of years. It's such a buggy program, and I would frequently find it crashing, or sometimes it would just fail during a rendering. Having said that, and touching the wood of my desk very, very strongly here, over the last few months, Premiere Pro has suddenly started behaving perfectly for me. And just the very fact that I've reported that here on the show is probably enough to curse me, to then have to move away to Filmora. But at the moment, yeah, Premiere Pro's doing okay. But I definitely like the sound of some of the easier ways that you can do things in Filmora rather than the more perhaps complicated ways that you do in Premiere Pro.
Super. Well, listen, Roger, as we say every single week, none of this would be possible without the work of pioneers and visionaries from the distant and recent past. Let's move on to This Week in History.
In 1890, crime writer Agatha Christie was born. Just think, Pascal, of all the films, plays and TV shows that are based on her stories.
Well, in 1940, 5 schoolboys exploring the Grotte of Lascaux in France discover a truly outstanding display of prehistoric cave art depicting animals in many different styles, dating back to 15,000 BC.
In 1959, a Soviet rocket crashes onto the moon's surface, becoming the first man-made object sent from Earth to reach the lunar surface. The event gave the Soviets a short-lived advantage in the space race and prompted even greater effort by the United States to develop its own space program.
And in 1997, the domain name Google.com is registered by Sergey Brin and Larry Page, and the first ever search happened a year later during a demonstration of the accuracy of Google compared to other search engines.
Fantastic.
Agatha Christie, my goodness, what a contribution.
Isn't it amazing that she has written so many books, crime novels, and created so many memorable characters that, again, have become almost, ingrained within pop culture? Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, and other famous detectives. Some maybe not, who maybe don't appear as much as those two, but genuinely, her books are almost timeless. Obviously, a lot of them were written in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and therefore you've got the historical setting. But even she used to set them further back in the past. I think she even wrote one murder mystery that was set back in the Aztec era. But I think the reason I just wanted to choose Agatha Christie this week, Pascal, was because of all the films, plays, TV shows, theatre productions that are based upon her books. How many times have we filmed Murder on the Orient Express? I mean, there's a recent one with Kenneth Branagh playing Hercule Poirot, and there's a sequel imminently, probably delayed by the COVID pandemic, of Death on the Nile, which is a sequel to Murder on the Orient Express. And then there were none. Murder at the Vicarage, Robert McGinty's Dead. There's so many of her books that have been turned into TV series and films that it's a classic masterclass in content repurposing, because all of those films wouldn't have existed if she had not put pen to paper.
I missed it completely, only because I suppose I don't follow the literature as much as I should. But last year was a 100-year anniversary of the very first book she wrote in 1920. The title escapes me, but I'm going to say something like Murder in Styles. And I believe it was introducing Hercule Poirot to the world, really. It was she was famous in France to the point where even in our French literature class, we studied one of her books as part of a themed month or quarter. And I have to say, for me, David Suchet is my Hercule Poirot. I know that other actors have played him, but he's nailed that kind of Belgian-French kind of little lilt so perfectly.
Yeah, I think it was The Mysterious Affair at Styles, if my memory serves me rightly. But and when I was at school, we actually read, and maybe it was Murder on the Orient Express, and we all thought that it was 𝗑𝗪𝗄𝗃 𝗃 until the teacher actually taught us how to pronounce it properly.
But yeah, what is lovely about This Week in History is back to this idea of there's tendency, particularly in the world of digital marketing, Roger, and I suppose online business, to only consider the last few years, the last 5-10 years where everything somehow has happened. And that is so untrue. Here you are, particularly a female writer, who tells you how to tell a story, how to create memorable characters with their own kind of flaws and quirks and so on. And 100 years later, the Agatha Christie estate still is going very strong. I had a quick look at the website. I mean, the things they do as well on the website, from gamifications to linking with academia and more, it's just really quite good. And they have converted now all her books into audiobooks, which must have been quite an undertaking.
Yeah, and again, I should have made a note of this, and I'll have to go looking for it again. But there are websites out there which actually take you through the Agatha Christie books and point out the clues as the narrative progresses that you should be aware of if you are going to be able to solve the crime yourself. And, that is a fabulous piece of work for somebody to do. But I don't think I've ever spotted all the clues in an Agatha Christie book, but they are always there. And
Wow.
She never cheats. She never cheats. The clues are always there. And if you're observant enough to find them, you will solve the mystery before you actually get to the reveal.
That's a pleasure of it. So for me, I wanted to take you back to 1940 in 𝗓𝗏𝗲𝗂𝗲𝗏. I mean, this is a case national pride. I hope you don't mind me saying. But
Yeah.
the story has been now, it's almost the stuff of legend. It's almost like its own adventure where, one schoolboy allegedly was either running after his dog, which was chasing a rabbit, or was just trying to avoid going to school and so on, but by accident stumbled upon literally a hole in the ground at the bottom of a tree, and just became a little curious, so went in on his own, then brought 4 of his friends a few days later to go in with candles and kind of rudimentary tools, discovered a long corridor, and then when they went deeper into it, discovered the cave art. And just that story, it's kind of the perfect way to spend a summer with your mates, right? When you're a young boy and having an adventure. So they went back home to tell their family, who did not believe them. It took actually several days before a grown-up finally believed their story and went in. The other thing that is important is that this was near the time of Nazi occupation. So actually, the French population locally kept the Groix de Lascaux hidden. And it took, after the war, people could go and visit it. We did the same, by the way, with wine. So from 𝗬𝗵𝗲 that was mentioned actually recently online. So a lot of French, people would hide, the art, the famous portraits and sculpture, but also the wine until we were liberated from the occupation. So from 1947, people could go and visit it, and sadly, very, very quickly, by the way, found that the cave had been open, there was more air circulation, but also because of the carbon dioxide that people were breathing out as we're visiting, and the candles creating smoke and so on, the cave and the painting started to deteriorate. You had lichen growing on it, and suddenly people said, we've got to stop this. So they stopped all the visits. They closed the cave. They sent experts in to repair the paintings using the belief techniques of the time from 15,000 BC, and to allow people to really experience this national treasure and what an heritage. They created replicas of the cave. So we're back to making copies of everything. So when you go to Lascaux and you would go to the visitor center, you have the amazing display you would expect from most visitor center, but then you can be visiting cave which are in exact replica to the millimeter and to the color, to the pigment of the cave art. But sadly, it's now sealed for fear of losing it forever.
I mean, just think, remember when we did a review of the Goonies last year on Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast, a group of boys searching for treasure. And that's exactly what happened to these kids finding this cave, but it was real. I mean, can you imagine how excited they must have been?
And like the Goonies, they were not believed by the grown-ups.
And nobody believed them. I know, that's just typical, isn't it?
Excellent. It's always a pleasure to go through this week in history with you. Let's get back to the present, if you don't mind, with our creator shout-out. Now, this is always a very, very heartwarming segment. So, Roger, who is in the spotlight today?
In my spotlight today is a gentleman called Martin Brooks. Now, I've known Martin for quite a long time, and he's a really good public speaker, a really good trainer, and he's actually done a lot of work over the years helping people to become better public speakers, and help, does presentation training, not only the actual putting together of the presentation, but also the delivery. And he's been working for a while now, especially during the lockdown, on a new type of course that he's just put together, and it's called the Body Language Decoder. Now, Martin is absolutely really interested in how we use body language when we're talking, and what I do like from time to time is that he'll publish a mini video of somebody like Boris Johnson doing a speech, or Donald Trump doing a speech, or a politician or a film star, and he'll then point out elements of their body language which might give an indication that they're lying, or it might give an indication that they're open and honest, or that they're defensive. And it's absolutely fascinating. And he's put together this course, and it comes in lots of modules, and it's all about how you can use your body language in your presentations. And it's just a really, really interesting, different take on helping somebody to improve their presentation skills. Now, usually it's all about how to do a PowerPoint presentation, or how to, map out your speech. Whereas this, I can't think of anybody who's done it this way. So if that sounds like it might be interesting, go and check out Martin Brooks. I'll leave his LinkedIn bio in the show notes, and it will point to the Body Language Decoder.
That's smashing that. I really like that. So my shout out is going to a gentleman called Nigel Greenwood. Now, Nigel is a customer experience and customer journey mapping expert. In fact, I reckon he'll agree with you about this obsessing, quest for understanding your customers. And he has translated his knowledge and expertise into a software solution, into workshop masterclasses, and of course, many, many LinkedIn posts are always a delight to read and listen to. But I wanted to give him the shout out because he's also the author of the weekly LinkedIn post, It's the Friday Shout Out. And It's the Friday Shout Out is something that I now look forward to. Now, we know about shouting out, and we know about the pleasure you can derive from mentioning people, but also in terms of what they receive. And if Nigel is listening, I wanted to let him know that I appreciate the shout outs, even though I am not mentioning them. And that's not me asking for a mention, is because when I see people that I know receiving a shout out from Nigel, even I feel better about it. I feel like my Friday has been enriched and so on. And it's just a reminder about the simpler things, the simple gestures, Roger, that can make a huge difference to people out there. So when, once again, I see the Friday shout out, and what Nigel does, he tells a story about that individual. He tells a story of the impact that they've had on him, whether it's on his business or his personal life. So you get to know a bit more about those individuals. And of course, they get a name check. And I feel thrilled to see individuals that I know that have helped Nigel. So as well as getting the shout out and maybe having that kind of positive ripple effect at a third level, Nigel, understand that all of us reading it as well, we feel amazing about it. And I just think that it's something that people should do more of, which could be also the remedy for all the nonsense and some of the negativity that you have on the internet.
So our creator shout-outs happen on a Wednesday, so it's a Wednesday shout-out for the Friday shout-out guy.
It is. So well done to both of you.
I'm not being flippant. It's a really good thing to do. And there are a few people who do these shout-outs quite regularly, and I do think it's a very nice way to grow your network and to show appreciation to all those other content creators that are out there.
Indeed. And once again, particularly for Nigel and all the others out there, we see it, we read it, and we get immense benefit from it, even though you may be talking to somebody else within our network. So it's just wonderful. Roger Edwards.
Yes,
it is time
Pascal Fintoni
for film marketing. Now, typically, Roger, you and I get to talk about a film where we have maybe months, maybe we have years of reflection. We've seen the film. We've been able to study the marketing campaign. We have lots of lessons to derive from our research, but not today. Today, we're talking about a film that nobody's seen. Nobody knows what it's about. In fact, the trailer was only released 24 hours ago. Let's watch it and listen to it again.
Thomas? You seem particularly triggered right now. Can you tell me what happened?
I've had dreams that weren't just dreams.
Am I crazy? We don't use that word in here.
Hi.
Have we met?
One pill makes you larger and one pill makes you small, and the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all. Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall.
Time to fly.
And if you go chasing rabbits,
If you want the truth, Neo, you're going to have to follow me.
and you know you're going to fall.
The only thing that matters to you is still here. I know it's why you're still fighting and why you will never give up. You don't know me, no?
When logic and proportion have fallen, so be dead. And white knight is talking backwards, and the red queens are with her head. Remember what the Dharma said. Feed your
After all these years, to be going back to where it all started. Back to the Matrix.
We are talking about The Matrix Resurrections, Chapter 4 of an amazing, amazing franchise. But as I mentioned a moment ago, this came out of nowhere. Literally over the last few days, the internet has gone on overdrive, Roger. And this trailer that we've just been watching, listening again, was only released literally 24 hours ago.
That's right, and I didn't know anything about this until you pointed it out to me a few days ago. And yes, the trailer out yesterday. It's incredibly interesting. It's definitely a Matrix film. I thought maybe it was a Matrix film starring John Wick as opposed to Neo, but we'll have the argument about the length of Keanu Reeves' hair later. But wow, yeah, I'm excited, and it's coming out in December. But I think what we really wanted to talk about today, Pascal, was the fact that even though the trailer dropped yesterday, there's a massive amount of debate, speculation, excitement, and almost like guerrilla marketing been going on since that trailer was shown to an exclusive audience at CinemaCon back in August 2021.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the news items and many of the blog posts and so on, felt very envious yet again. So people were invited on 24th of August, and the date is important because we can see how the speed at which things are moving. And I read articles about people describing something they'd seen, and it's so, I'd imagine even when they were writing it, Roger, they must have felt, I can't do justice to this, because if what they saw was the trailer or even the teaser of that I've now seen, it's almost impossible to express in words what's on screen, isn't it?
Yeah, and from what I can gather, when they showed this trailer at CinemaCon, nobody was allowed to do a film copy of it with their mobile phone. So presumably they had to frisk everybody who was going into the auditorium to stop them having anything that they could use to record it. So yes, they were in that room and they were probably blown away by that trailer like we were when we watched it yesterday. But they weren't, they had no way of showing it to anybody else other than actually explaining, telling. And that's what's really interesting, because as you say, there's lots of reaction videos to this trailer on YouTube, as you would expect, but normally people play the trailer and then pause it and say, this is what I think is going to happen, blah blah blah. But people are doing reaction videos to a trailer that they can't show videos of, and people are doing reaction videos to trailers that they haven't even seen. They're doing reaction videos to the reaction videos of the people who were in that room at cinema, and it's almost become this sort of, it's word of mouth gone absolutely mad, isn't it?
And if you're the filmmakers, bear in mind that the release has been delayed because of COVID, you'd be pretty pleased with this. So playing the card of scarcity and exclusivity is something that has not been done for a while, and that's been great. Now, I would say, I was envious, of course, but we didn't have to wait too long, because on the 7th of September, merely 3 days ago, This is 𝗧𝗵𝗵 was republished with a different URL, which we're going to discuss in a moment. And suddenly, out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, you're faced with this very, very dramatic image of the red pill and the blue pill. And here you are. You can choose one of them, because as the strapline says, the choice is yours. And on the 7th of September, on the choice is yours .whatisthematrix.com, you can play the teasers.
Yeah. And of course, depending upon which pill you chose, you actually get to see a slightly different trailer. In fact, I think there was a fairly sizable number of combinations that were triggered by the clicking, wasn't it? It wasn't just 2 teaser trailers. I think they had all sorts of different bits that came together. So it was just, and I've even seen people on the internet who must have watched it as many times as they could to get all of the little bits, and then they've tried to cobble them together into their own trailers.
They did, yeah. So I would love to speak to the tech team on this one, because this is what happens. If you've not had the pleasure yet, go on it. Whether you choose the red or the blue pill, something happens, which is that you're being addressed as the audience. So somebody, the narrator, is talking to you directly, and it also would say, you believe this is the time, and the time is being read out to you, and every time it is the correct. So right now, as I'm recording, with Roger, it's 15:44 in the UK. If I was playing the teaser, the voice would say, you believe it's 3:44 p.m. And when you play the teaser a few minutes later, the time has changed. So they also have the times read out. And according to people who have been spending far too much time online, because you have core scenes, but then after you have scenes that changes all the time. I will confess, Roger, I've watched about 20 times the teasers on both the red and the blue pill, and every time there's a new scene. Yeah, so according to, let's call them the geeks and the nerds out there who have been looking at the teasers, there's to the tune of over 100,000 variation, because there's so many scenes that keep changing. I've watched it 10, 20 times, and every time I think, oh, that's it, I finally find the point where it's go back to, version 1, and then no, there is an extra scene in the teasers. So that was the 7th of September. And then 2 days later, we have the official trailer.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable to think that they shot a voiceover for every minute of the 24-hour clock. I mean, that is utter dedication, isn't it? And fabulous detail. Unbelievable.
And in terms of that being very cleverly database driven, like I said, on this occasion, I would love to speak to the tech team and say, how do you do it? How do you do it? Is it, random algorithm? Is it went off for the time before for the scenes as well? And when we and I looked at The Matrix, the original one, in episode 32 of Two Geeks and Martin podcast, actually, it's quite interesting. It should be, obviously moving on. The trailer finished on a question that the character of Trinity asked, and basically she was saying, it was Morpheus, I beg your pardon, who said to Neo, but I say to the audience, no one can be told what the Matrix is, you have to see it for yourself. Now, in this trailer, because we know what the Matrix is, we have somebody else that closes the trailer by saying, as you heard a moment ago, after all these years, to be going back to where it all started, back to the Matrix. And once again, they're using one line from the movie to address the audience, but actually to mirror how we feel.
Yeah. And another thing which is really interesting is that I believe that when this gets launched in December, I think it's the 22nd of December, it's going to be launched in theatres, and also at the same time it's going to be streamed. Now, this is something that I've been saying throughout the pandemic. Maybe it's a time when we have to get to that stage where we give people the choice to go to the theatre or to go to and watch it streaming. But if you choose the red pill or the blue pill, it sort of hints that, I think the red pill is the one that reveals the real world to you, that it's a computer simulation way back in the original film. And if you chose the red pill for the teaser trailer, that was very heavily implying that you should see it in the theatres, i.e. that will be the best way to reveal it. Whereas if you chose the blue pill, where you're more than happy to just let the world stay as it is in your context, then that's the streaming. So even though they are going to release it cinemas and streaming at the same time, the undercurrent, the sort of subconscious nudge is still for you to go and see it at the cinema.
Can I quickly ask you, because you are the music fan really and very knowledgeable about music as part of the Two Geeks, the choice of the song White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane, which I think is probably the more current version by Dance Society, it's just absolutely spot on, isn't it?
Oh yeah, the white. I mean, it's. In fact, the reason I watched the trailer more than once, even though the visuals are absolutely stunning, was to listen to the song again.
And they talk about taking the pill, and it's just. I think as a filmmaker, you must have thanked the god of cinema to give you, this track. So, unusually for Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast, we can't give a big review and essay about the marketing techniques because they haven't happened yet. What I will say is that if you go on imdb.com and look at the window that says storyline, this is what you can read. The plot is currently unknown. And what I really want, I'm going to ask you for your prediction about what they might do next for the next three months, really leading up to the release. Oh, by the way, a lovely palindrome, because if you look at the date in the US, where it's a 12, 22, 21, so lovely little symmetry there. But when it comes to the marketing, what can they do next without spoiling the storyline? Because I don't want to know the story. I want to be blown away like I was in 1999 when The Matrix came out.
I don't know. I think maybe, Pascal, because they've already done this remarkable trick of stitching together potentially hundreds of different little scenes to create all sorts of different teaser trailers, I think that they'll carry on doing that sort of thing and maybe pepper the future marketing with some red herrings. So we're not quite sure what the reality is or what the obfuscation is. So some of it might be a hint as to what's happening in the plot, but I think we'll be given quite a few red herrings so that we only find out the truth when we actually see the film itself.
I hope so, because in a way, unfortunately, when you go on IMDb and you see the list of the cast, it does give some of it away, which is, I think, the element of surprise. It is what it is. So I'm going to certainly try not to read and watch too many things. I think there's an element for them to do things we've seen before on Two Geeks and Marketing podcast of gamification, asking audiences, what do you want reality to be? Maybe you could play games, and being one of the characters in the Matrix. They could even do some things like around geolocation, as we discussed with other marketing campaigns, where could you, for example, go somewhere around the UK, take a picture and say, I think this is fake, this is part of the Matrix, and you could have a bit of fun with that. Or could they put some QR codes where you could reveal maybe some additional teasers? So I think the element where of audience participation through games, through quizzes, through riddles, I think would be great. But I really don't want them to tell me any more about the story. I think the trailer is so rich, and you could freeze frame and watch different ways of what is happening.
Yeah, and of course, back in the 90s when the original films came out, we did have 3D games, didn't we? But they were in their early formative years. The graphics were nowhere near as good as they are today. So I think that, virtual worlds now are much more close to reality than they were when the Matrix films first came out. So maybe they'll be doing something with VR or they call it the metaverse, don't they? Maybe there'll be some metaverse stuff going on here, Pascal.
There's one thing that was more from the world of advertising. You may remember, I think it was Honda that did this thing where you went on their official website, they gave you video clips and music, and you can create your own adverts. And I wonder whether, again, in the spirit of gamification again and audience participation, why don't you allow people to invent their own Matrix trailer and publish it and get reaction from others? I think there's something in there where I suppose what I would want is not to have just to be passive for the next 3 months and just, bite my nails nervously thinking, I hope the story is going to be good, because I don't want them to tell me what the story is. But I'd like to have something to occupy myself and get excited and have some more to talk about.
Yeah, just imagine though, if so many people have done a damn good job of putting their own trailers together now already with what they've been given on YouTube. Imagine what they'd be able to put together if they were actually given some sort of platform to do it.
So, Roger, this was episode 52 of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast, packed with news, content, tech, and some wisdom, we hope so. Until the next one, please go out there and make sure your marketing is done right. I was Pascal Fintoni and he was Roger Edwards. Bye for now.